Tonight's story follows a black janitor working the graveyard shift at a powerful tech firm until one unlocked computer reveals a dangerous breach, a hidden conspiracy, and a chance to reclaim a stolen future. But the deeper she digs, the more she realizes this wasn't just about code, it was about erasure, power, and finally being seen. What happens when the one person no one paid attention to becomes the only one who can stop everything from collapsing? Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to follow, because tomorrow's story might just flip your world upside down. Megan Glassberg didn't say much anymore. That was something she'd perfected over time. How to make her presence small. Smaller than the hum of fluorescent lights, smaller than the quiet swish of her mop across waxed floors. She clocked in every night at 11 o'clock p.m. sharp, carried her blue Stratix janitorial badge clipped to her pocket, and pushed her cleaning cart like it was armor. No one looked at her twice. Not even once, really. The day people left with a flick of office lights and the lingering scent of espresso. At night, Megan entered a different world, keycards, code-locked doors, and hollow silence. Her boots echoed down the glossy corridors of Stratix Systems' top floor. Executive suites, boardrooms, the inner sanctum of a cybersecurity empire. She liked this floor best. Fewer smudges, fewer coffee spills, fewer eyes. She unlocked the last hallway, her favorite one. It was always quiet here. The hallway ended in a glass door marked E. Brandt, CEO. She never went inside, just wiped the doorknob, emptied the trash, and moved on. Tonight, though, the door was cracked open. Megan stopped. Her hand hovered an inch from the handle. That door was never open. Not once in the 8 months she'd worked here. She glanced around. The hallway was still. Cameras watched from high corners, but no alarms blared, no red lights blinked. Still, her heart kicked up a little. She pushed the door gently. The office was dark, except for a soft green glow from the corner desk. A monitor blinked. Text scrolled slowly, mechanically. Command line interface. Old school. Unusual for Stratix. No flashy dashboards, no GIU. Just black screen, white letters. She stepped inside. Unauthorized access detected, the screen read. And then another lie. Injecting payload, process stalled, override needed. The words looked alive, not in the literal sense, but Megan saw their shape and structure, like someone else might hear music. She blinked, as if trying to banish the old reflex rising in her fingers. As she shouldn't, but her hand moved anyway. She pressed a single key. The screen changed. A path opened. A rabbit hole of bad code buried under clean structures. Elegant, but flawed. Dangerous. Whoever had written it knew what they were doing. Felt better. But so did she. Megan's fingers hovered. She could fix it, or at least slow it, give the internal systems time to detect the breach and wall it off, like cauterizing a wound. Her hands moved again without permission, not like before, back in her old life. Now she typed like she was being chased. Her commands were quiet, precise, surgical. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. She was 10 years younger again. She was someone else again. The variable popped on screen, _ghost_root temp. Her heart stuttered. She remembered that name. She had created it once, a long time ago, in a life she'd buried. Suddenly, what the hell are you doing? The voice shattered the air like a gunshot. Megan jumped back from the keyboard like she'd been burned. Her hands flew to her sides. Elliot Brandt stepped out from the shadows near the tall window. He hadn't turned on the lights, just stood there, half lit by the screen, his face all sharp edges and disbelief. Her voice caught in her throat. He moved closer, fast. "This is a private system," he growled. "Who let you in here?" "I didn't touch anything. I was just—" "You were typing." Megan opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound like a lie. Not to him. Not when she looked like just a janitor who'd wandered into the wrong room. "You work in facilities, right?" he asked. "Night shift?" She nodded. "Then what the hell are you doing inside my office, on my terminal?" The silence between them thickened. "I saw something," she said finally. "There was a code injection. It looked like a breach." He laughed once, short, bitter. "You saw a breach and thought you'd what, save the company?" Megan stood stiff. "I was just trying to help." "By logging into the CEO's terminal?" "I didn't log in." "Then how?" "The terminal was open. Someone was already inside. It wasn't me." She took a shaky breath. "I know what remote injection patterns look like. I wasn't trying to hack anything. I was trying to stop it." He didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared at her like she was a foreign language he didn't care to translate. Then, suddenly, he struck her. A backhand. Sharp and fast. Her cheek exploded with heat and noise. The sound of it rang in her ears, louder than his voice. "Get out." Megan stumbled back, hand to her face, eyes wide with shock. Not pain. She'd had worse. But the kind of shock that hollows you out. Not the slap. The erasure. Like she didn't matter. Like her words hadn't even landed. "I said get the hell out," Elliot snapped, pointing at the door. She backed away, her hands trembling, her eyes wet but not crying. Pride held them back. She reached the door and paused. "Just look at the code," she whispered. He didn't answer. He was already turning to the desk, reaching for the intercom. So she left. Her heart thudded, not with fear but with old humiliation. The kind that leaves bruises in places no one can see. She walked back into the hallway, shut the door behind her, and leaned against the wall. Her fingers still ached to type. Behind the glass, Elliot stood in front of the screen. Her code, because it was her code, was still running, patching, redirecting, cleaning up after someone else's mess. And then he froze. His eyes caught something. A comment, a style, a shorthand in the structure, nesting logic with single-line notes. Familiar. His pulse slowed. That formatting. He remembered it. Not from here, not from this system. From 6 months ago, when Stratix had been attacked by an anonymous exploit, and someone had saved it, silently, without credit. One patch file, one embedded signature. His breath caught. He looked back toward the door, but she was gone. He whispered aloud, to no one, "Who the hell are you?" Elliot Brandt didn't sleep much. Never had. Sleep was for people who didn't run empires. The kind who clocked out at 5 and trusted others to keep the lights on. Elliot trusted no one. Not anymore. That's why he'd come back tonight. It was nearly midnight when he stepped into his office, expecting silence. Instead, he found a stranger. No, not a stranger. A name tag. Megan Glassberg, the janitor. And she'd been sitting at his computer. Now he sat in the chair she'd fled from, jaw tight, still tasting the shock. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't type. He just stared. There it was, and that signature. He'd never forgotten it, not in 6 months. It had haunted him more than he'd admitted to anyone. Hell, more than he'd admitted to himself. The breach had been surgical, silent, no ransom note, no flashy banner, just a slow, creeping override on Stratix's AI backbone. They'd caught it too late. It had already rewritten core protocols. Every senior engineer panicked, and then, in the middle of it all, one patch appeared. Clean, silent, brilliant. It didn't just stop the breach. It reversed the spread without breaking a single active thread. Whoever wrote it knew exactly what they were doing. No one on his team had ever seen anything like it. He'd launched an internal audit, a search, even tried tracking the patch through VPN logs. Nothing. Whoever SMC was, they didn't want to be found. Until now, his eyes scanned the screen again, watching the ghost of that same style bloom across his system. Megan's fingerprints, no, SS fingerprints, were all over it. He leaned back slowly, his anger cooling into curiosity. She said she'd seen a breach. He'd dismissed it, slapped her. Now the data told a different story. She was right, and he was wrong. He hated being wrong. For a long time, Elliot didn't move. He just sat there, listening to the gentle hum of the server room through the vent behind his desk. Then, finally, he closed the screen and stood up. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Megan sat in the break room downstairs, a rag pressed to her cheek. Her fingers wouldn't stop trembling. Not from the slap. She'd absorbed far worse. It was the rage after, the shame of being silenced. Again, she stared at the floor, not really seeing it, just patterns of tile blurring in her mind. How could she be so stupid? She'd told herself she'd never touch code again, never open that door, never even think like a developer again. It was over. That world was gone. And yet, her hands had moved on their own. And he'd seen her. The worst part wasn't the slap. It was the way he looked at her, like she was nothing, not even worth a second thought, just another trespasser, like a rat scurrying across his marble floor. She wanted to disappear. Megan Glassberg. The voice made her flinch. She looked up. It wasn't a security guard. It was him. Elliot Brandt stood in the doorway, suit jacket open, tie loosened, but expression unreadable. Her mouth opened, but no words came. "I need you to come with me," he said. She didn't move. "You're not in trouble," he added, though the words sounded stiff, like he didn't know how to say them. Still, she didn't trust him, not after what he did. But something in his tone wasn't angry anymore. It was something else. Please. That part surprised her most. He'd said please. They rode the elevator in silence. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The hum of the car, the soft click of the floor numbers. It felt like hours. When the doors opened, he led her down the same hallway where it had all gone wrong. Past the cameras, past the glare of LED lights, past her silence. Into the lion's den. She hesitated at the door to his office. Her hand grazed her cheek. He noticed. His voice came low. "You don't have to be afraid of me." She stepped inside anyway. The office looked unchanged, but the screen was on again, the same code, still scrolling. He gestured toward it. "That's yours, isn't it?" She stayed silent. "The patch, the structure, the logic. It's not from our team, and it matches something I've been trying to trace for 6 months." He turned to her now, face unreadable. "MC," he said. "It didn't need to." He saw it in her eyes. "You saved this company," he said. Silence. "I spent weeks trying to find out who wrote that patch. We were on the edge of collapse. And you fixed it. Why?" Megan's throat was dry. She wanted to speak, but the words crawled like thorns. She swallowed. "I didn't do it for you. I didn't think you did. I did it because I knew what they were doing, and I knew I could stop it. You weren't on the payroll. You weren't even... I was in the building." He blinked. She looked away. "I used to be a developer at another firm. I found a vulnerability. I reported it privately. They buried it and buried me with it. I got blamed for the leak when it went public. My name, my credentials, everything gone." Her voice cracked. They called me unstable, said I made it up. I lost my license, my credibility. I was done. He sat down across from her, not interrupting. I needed work. This job paid weekly, no questions, just floors and trash bins. So I took it. She let the truth settle like dust. I told myself I'd never code again. Elliot exhaled through his nose, long and slow. You're brilliant, he said, almost reluctantly. That patch wasn't just functional. It was elegant. She looked at him now, eyes narrowing. You hit me, she said quietly. He paused. Yes, I want to hear you say it. I was wrong, he said. I reacted without thinking. And I'm sorry. The words didn't fix it, not fully, but something shifted. She nodded once. He stood and turned back to the screen. I don't know who tried to access this system tonight, but they got deeper than anyone ever has. She didn't respond. He looked over his shoulder. Would you stay? Just for an hour. I need someone who understands this level of architecture, and clearly you do. Megan hesitated. She could leave, walk out, and never come back. But the screen called to her again, and the code on it wasn't finished. She stepped forward, just a little, then more, and before she could second-guess herself, she was back in front of the keyboard. Her fingers hovered. Elliot watched her in silence, and then she began to type. The moment Megan's fingers touched the keys again, everything else fell away. The sting on her cheek, the sleeplessness, the shame. All of it dissolved under the hum of the machine and the rhythm of her thoughts catching speed. She wasn't thinking about Elliot Brandt standing behind her. She wasn't thinking about what it meant to be trusted again, or if she could afford to be. Right now, it was just her and the breach. Lines of code pulsed on the screen, not in real time, but like echoes of something that had already slithered through the system, buried deep and quiet. A foreign presence, careful, confident. Whoever had written this knew how Stratix operated from the inside. She narrowed her eyes. This isn't just an external threat, she murmured, almost forgetting Elliot was still in the room. The attacker's using local architecture protocols. Meaning this isn't coming from outside the firewall, it's mimicking internal access. Someone inside the building, or someone with credentials. Elliot stepped closer. Could they have piggybacked off a guest device? No, she said, already typing. Stratix endpoint security is tight. They'd need root access, admin level or higher. He was silent a moment. Then quietly, that narrows it to 12 people. Her hands didn't stop moving. She opened a buried file, one that shouldn't have even been visible to standard users. But Megan wasn't using the system like a user. She was navigating it like a ghost. A familiar one. You said you didn't log in, Elliot said behind her. I didn't, she replied. The system's remote access was already running. Someone triggered it, probably tried a batch override. Thought sounds like something we should have detected. We did, but only after I stalled it. He didn't respond to that. She could feel his ego folding under the weight of that sentence. But he didn't argue. Good. That meant he was learning something. Megan pulled up the command history. Her eyes scanned the timestamps, looking for the crack, the entry point. She found it within seconds. There? She said, pointing. 12 minutes before I walked in. Someone ran an unsigned shell script, and they used ghost variables. Identifiers that replicate core system files without flagging standard integrity checks. Elliot frowned. Why doesn't our system flag ghost variables? Because nobody thought they'd be weaponized like this, not unless someone rebuilt the architecture from the inside out. He ran a hand down his face, jaw tight. What exactly are they trying to do? Megan's fingers paused. They're not trying to crash the system, she said slowly. They're not even trying to extract data. Then what? They're trying to reshape it, gradually, quietly, bit by bit, over time. Reshape it how? Change access priorities, redirect key functions, bury override commands that would give them total control, without needing root login again. If they finish this, they could trigger a full re-index of Stratix's system hierarchy. The entire company's infrastructure would respond to them instead of your leadership protocols. Elliot's silence felt heavy now, real. He moved to sit on the edge of the desk. You mean we'd lose control of our own company? Megan nodded. And you wouldn't even know it until it was too late. Her eyes flicked to the screen again. But they're not finished, she added. They started tonight. They needed this window. He shook his head. So why now? That's the part that scares me, she said. Because if they needed tonight, something else is coming. She pulled up a back-end terminal and began a manual scan of outgoing ports. The attacker was smart, she'd give them that. Very little trace traffic, and whatever routing they used had probably bounced through half the globe. But she had her own tricks, ones she hadn't shared with anyone in years. And as she worked, something new appeared. A line of script embedding itself into a dormant file on the server, like a fingerprint pressed in fresh wax. She highlighted it, magnified the syntax, and read it aloud. Recalibrate. CMA. Line. Greater than Stratix. XXC. Malframe. She froze. But that's not just control, she said. That's an overwrite directive. Elliot leaned in. In English, they're replacing your executive functions. He stood abruptly. Jesus. Megan reached for the kill switch, but the directive slipped deeper into the tree before she could intercept. She slammed her palm on the desk in frustration. They're good, she muttered. Not as good as me, but close. You can stop it? She didn't answer right away. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, isolating processes, flagging behavior patterns, setting trap codes like digital caltrops. I can slow them, she said. Maybe buy us hours, maybe minutes. Elliot stood over her, arms crossed. What do you need? She looked up at him. A real workstation, admin-level terminal access, unrestricted. You'll have it. And I want your security logs for the past 30 days. His brow lifted. Why? Because whoever did this didn't start tonight. They've been laying groundwork, testing your defenses, mapping your blind spots. You think it's someone on my team? I know it is. Elliot didn't argue. Instead, he stepped away and unlocked his cabinet, pulling a secure drive. All logs are on here. Biometric entries, remote session keys, workstation triggers. Knock yourself out. Megan took it without a word, hailing him. Are you doing this? He asked. She looked at him, tired eyes sharp beneath the office lights. You think I'm doing this for you? He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. I'm doing this because I saw something wrong, and because people like the one behind this, they count on people like me not getting involved. Her tone was flat, heavy with things unsaid. Besides, she added, sliding the drive into a secure USB port, I never did like being underestimated. Elliot stared at her for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod. I'll get your access cleared. He stepped out. The door clicked shut behind him. Megan sat back for a moment, her hands in her lap, the glow of the screen painting her face in green and gray. Ghost in the machine. That's what they'd called her in forums back in the day. Before everything fell apart. Before the silence. But she wasn't a ghost now. Not anymore. She was back inside the system. And whoever had done this, they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. The night crept on with no signs of sleep or slowing. Megan's back ached, but she didn't move. Her fingers darted across the keyboard with relentless purpose, a rhythm she hadn't fallen into in years. The world shrank to the screen in front of her and the trail she was chasing, a digital ghost that had no face, no name, just fingerprints in the code. She was on it now. The trap she'd set an hour ago had caught a twitch, a movement inside the Stratix core network, silent ping that wasn't supposed to be there. She followed it. Layer by layer, she peeled it back. This wasn't someone trying to smash through the gates. This was someone with the keys, walking straight through the front door and making just enough noise to be invisible. Her eyes narrowed. He was close. She dragged a cursor across a string of disguised packets and decrypted one. Command path /dev/strx_access /sysadmin user /cache_temp_hidden bin. End of. Megan froze. That directory didn't exist. At least, it wasn't supposed to. She opened the virtual file, her heart picking up speed. What stared back at her wasn't just override code. It was a clone, an unauthorized mirror of Stratix's executive control hub. Every script, every protocol, copied, slightly altered, and worse, timed. A task scheduler blinked in the corner of the screen. It was counting down. 2:37 and 15 seconds. She checked the logs. It had been counting since 7:00 p.m. The switch was set to happen just before sunrise, just when the first wave of employees would log in. The breach would slip through with them, undetected. And once it executed, Stratix wouldn't just be compromised. It would be under new management. She grabbed the intercom. "Brant," she said, voice sharp. "We've got a timer, just over 2.5 hours left." He answered almost immediately. "I'm on my way." The intercom cut out. Megan leaned forward, typing faster now. She isolated the scheduler, threw a decoy process at it, then looped it into a false environment. That bought them time. 10 minutes, maybe 20. But not enough. She was about to launch a new firewall protocol when she heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, fast. The door flew open. It wasn't Elliot. Megan's eyes locked with the man in the doorway. Late 30s, clean-cut, tan skin, wearing a Stratix ID badge around his neck. His expression was tight, not confused, not panicked. Calculated. "You're not supposed to be in here," he said, voice low. She stood slowly. "Neither are you." "You're just the janitor," he said. "Where's Brant?" "Not here." The man took a step inside, closing the door behind him. Megan's eyes flicked to the screen. She tapped a single key. Lock engaged. The data froze mid-cesses, encrypted instantly. The man didn't flinch. "That was a mistake," he said. "I've made worse," she replied. He took another step forward. "Don't," she said. "Or what?" Her eyes didn't leave his. "I don't need to stop you," she said. "The logs already got what I needed." He hesitated. "Your code structure," she added. "It's messy. But clever. I've seen it before. You did the dry run 6 months ago, didn't you?" His expression twitched, just slightly. But she had him. "I was wondering how someone got this far without tripping the entire network," she said. "Now I know. Shame you won't be able to tell anyone." "You think I didn't record this entire session?" she said calmly. "You think I didn't log your entry just now?" He took a breath, trying to keep cool, but the flicker in his eyes was all the truth she needed. "You're not going to stop the countdown," he said. "You're too late." She smiled faintly. "That's what they said last time, too." The door swung open again, hard. Elliot burst in. His eyes moved between Megan and the man. "Ford," Elliot said, surprised. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ford turned, composed now. "I could ask you the same. You're off shift." "I came to check a report from IT," Ford said smoothly. "One of the overnight diagnostics tripped. I saw the breach code running from your terminal and came to verify." That doesn't explain why you locked the door, Megan said. Ford ignored her. You have a janitor sitting in the CO's chair. She's not just the janitor, Elliot said. The look on Ford's face changed subtly. Not surprised. Just annoyed. You brought her in on this? He asked Elliot. He discovered it hours ago. Megan kept her gaze steady. I don't think she's the problem, Elliot added. Ford chuckled. And what you think I am? Megan stood slowly from the chair. I think we're wasting time. We've got a full system overwrite scheduled in 2.5 hours, and whoever set it up left a trail of sloppy input triggers in the mirrored directory. Guess whose login token was embedded in the scheduler permissions? Elliot turned sharply. Yours, Megan said, staring Ford down. Your name, your signature, your access logs. Ford's smile faded, and then in one quick motion he stepped forward fast. Too fast. Megan was ready. She grabbed the edge of the chair and slammed it into his knee. Ford stumbled, cursed, reached for her wrist. She twisted away, bumping into the desk. Elliot moved next. He didn't hit Ford, just pulled a small key fob from his pocket and slammed it into the wall panel near the door. An alarm shrieked. Red light spun. Security protocol. Ford froze. What the hell are you doing? He barked. Elliot's voice was ice. Ending your career. Within 30 seconds, 2 guards rushed into the room, tasers in hand. Ford didn't resist. He didn't have time to. As they cuffed him, he looked at Megan. This won't stop it, he said. She didn't blink. You're right, she said. I will. The guards dragged him out. The door closed again. Silence. Elliot exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. He looked at Megan, still standing beside the desk, chest rising and falling, not from fear, but focus. Have built this from the inside, she said. He's been laying it out for months, and we've got just over 2 hours to undo it. Elliot gave a small nod. You still want in? She looked him in the eye. I was never out. By the time Ford was escorted out of the building, the silence he left behind felt louder than any alarm. Elliot stood at the far side of the office, hands pressed to the edge of the conference table, head bowed like someone trying to pray his way out of a disaster. Megan, on the other hand, didn't move from the terminal. The seconds were ticking, literally, and the breach code's scheduler was still alive, suspended but not dead. 2 hours now, that was the window. She pulled up the clone directory again. The entire interface looked like a distorted mirror of Stratix's operating system, except this version had been modified to follow commands not from Elliot Brandt's executive terminal, but from a remote protocol with no registered ID. Whoever had programmed it hadn't been sloppy. Ford had talent. Not her level of talent, but enough to fool a building full of engineers. Elliot finally broke the silence. So he was one of ours. He ran internal DevSec, which made him the perfect one to hide in plain sight, Megan said, fingers still flying. He didn't have to break in. He built his trap slowly and made sure your own systems wouldn't question him. He sat down heavily in the leathered chair near the far wall, rubbing his jaw like he was trying to erase the last hour. He's been working on this for months, she added, and if I had to guess, this was meant to trigger just before a product launch or a merger. Something public, something huge. Elliot looked up. We're supposed to announce our satellite encryption framework in 3 weeks. Government contracts. 7-figure pilot. She nodded. That would have been it. He waits until your name's attached to high-level defense work, then flips the system. Suddenly Stratix is an empty shell. He owns the source code. He owns the servers, maybe even the patents. You get investigated, your name burns down with a company, he sells it all on the black market and vanishes. Elliot stared at her, eyes dull with something that wasn't quite shock anymore, just the weight of betrayal. I trusted him. Most predators look like friends, Megan replied, especially in places like this. She zoomed in on the override path. The code was complex, coiled into itself like a living thing. Each string called on another, looping redundantly across server nodes to prevent a single-point failure. It was resilient, smart, but it had a flaw. Megan grinned, just slightly. "What?" Elliot asked. Ford was so busy covering his trail from the security team he didn't think anyone would ever go in through the emergency archive. He raised an eyebrow. "We still use that?" "No," she said, "but it's still there, and he forgot to close a cross-recture flag." She cracked it open, and there it was. His real signature. It wasn't in the code itself. It was in the way the system was structured. The exact indentation, the comment spacing, the unique shorthand for temporary variables. Developers had fingerprints, just like writers. And Megan remembered this one. "I've seen his code before," she muttered. Elliot turned toward her. "Years ago. A project I consulted on. Vector and analytics. He was junior then, but brilliant. Even then he liked to bury mirror logic in backup shells. I flagged it. Management ignored me. Same pattern. Same habits." He crossed his arms. "How did you end up mopping floors after that?" Megan kept typing, eyes on the screen. "I reported the vulnerability, not just in writing. I walked into a board meeting and laid it out. I didn't know Ford was in the room when I did it." Elliot was quiet. She went on. "The breach went public. They needed a scapegoat. They said I doctored logs. My credentials were revoked. My name was blacklisted. I haven't written code on the record in almost 4 years." Now he understood. "You were even back then." She said nothing. Just kept working. Her silence was louder than any confirmation. "You could have left," he said, after what I did earlier. You had every reason." She didn't pause. "I didn't come back for you." "Then why?" "Because I knew I could stop it. And because people like him always get away with it, when people like me stay quiet." Elliot said nothing. He just watched her as she rewrote the code in real time, unraveling Ford's override loop line by line, replacing it with a recursive sinkhole, a trap that would absorb the execution signal and redirect it into a void of fake directories and false flags. Once it fired, the system would believe it had overwritten itself, while actually triggering a containment protocol and locking the attacker out. It was genius. No, it was art. She stopped typing and sat back. "It's done," she said. "The shell will still trigger at 5:00, i.e. MEM, but now it'll isolate the clone network and trace any external remote calls back to their origin. The breach will effectively eat itself." Elliot stood. "Just like that?" She gave a tired smile. "Not just like that. It took everything I had." He approached the terminal and stared at the screen. Lines of her code blinked back at him. Calm, clean, final. He looked at her. "What happens now?" he asked. "You make the call," she said. "You bring in your legal team. You do the cleanup. You make it right." He nodded slowly. "And you?" "I go back to mopping floors." He blinked. "You're serious?" She didn't answer. Elliot looked away for a long moment. Then he said, "You saved Stratix. Twice. You should be leading our security division." She looked up at him finally. "You slapped me, Elliot. You dismissed me without even listening. You made me invisible." "I know. You don't fix that with a job offer." He nodded. "Fair." She rose from the chair. "I didn't do this for a second chance," she said. "I did it because I was the only one who could." He stepped aside, letting her pass. But before she reached the door, he spoke again. "You know," he said, "the whole time we were trying to find SS, my lead engineer swore it was a ghost, said nobody could code that way and just vanish." She paused. Elliot smiled faintly. "I'm glad the ghost decided to come back." Megan turned her head slightly, just enough to let the corner of her mouth curl. "Ghosts don't come back," she said. "We just stop hiding." And then she walked out, leaving the terminal behind, but taking her name with her. Megan didn't go home after she left Elliot's office. She didn't go back to the janitor's closet either. Instead, she found herself standing in the back stairwell of the building, the cold, concrete kind with metal rails and echoing footsteps. No cameras, no keypads, no eyes. She gripped the railing with both hands and just breathed. Her head was a storm. The adrenaline hadn't worn off yet, but the weight had changed. Earlier, she'd felt hunted. Now, she felt something different. Not safe. No, that was too easy. But recognized. The system was safe. The trap had been diffused. Ford was caught. She should feel relieved. She didn't. Instead, she felt hollow, like someone had opened a sealed room in her chest and all the air had rushed out. Not because of what she'd done, but because of what it had taken to do it. It wasn't the first time she'd had to claw her way out of silence, but it was the first time anyone had seen her do it. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the rail, the metal cold against her forehead. The past wouldn't stop knocking. She remembered it too clearly, how quickly the fall had come. Back then, she was on a team at Vectron that had been riding high, data integrity, AI finance modeling. Her work was fast, clean, a little too smart for some of her managers. But when she'd found the exploit, a silent redirect embedded deep in the billing software, she hadn't stayed quiet. She reported it, privately at first. Then, when nothing happened, she spoke up louder. And that's when it all changed. Meetings got canceled, emails disappeared. She was accused of tampering. When the leak finally went public, the company claimed she'd fabricated the vulnerability to blackmail them. No hearing, no chance to explain. Just erased. Within a month, her professional licenses were revoked. Projects she'd authored were reassigned to junior developers. Her name was blacklisted across the industry. The few people who reached out stopped calling. She couldn't get interviews, couldn't even get callbacks. By month 3, she was cleaning office buildings under her middle name. Glassberg. She'd stopped trying to clear her name, stopped trying to explain. But she never stopped coding, not really, not in her head. That's how the Stratix patch had happened. 6 months ago, when she overheard a couple of engineers in the elevator talking about a breach they couldn't contain, she'd gone home, pulled out a borrowed laptop, and spent 12 hours building the patch anonymously. She'd used an old handle, SX, and sent it through a secure private tunnel into Stratix's public test server, hoping someone smart enough would find it. They had, but nobody ever knew it was her. Until tonight. The stairwell door creaked open. Elliot's voice followed. "I thought I might find you here." She didn't move. "I used to come here too," he said, "when I didn't want anyone to see me thinking." Megan stayed quiet. Elliot walked up a few steps, stopping a short distance from her. "You did more than just stop a breach. You gave us a blueprint for how to survive one." "I didn't do it for Stratix," she said. "I know." She finally looked at him. "I didn't come here for a thank you either." He nodded. "That's not why I'm here." They stood in silence again. Not awkward. Just full of everything that had gone unsaid. "I asked my legal team to look up your case at Vectron," he said. Megan straightened slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. Because if someone buried your name once, they'll try again, and I can't let that happen." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. "Oh." "They found inconsistencies," he continued. "Tampered HR logs, backdated timestamps. One of the board members resigned quietly a year later. Another was investigated for securities fraud and walked." "Yeah," Megan said bitterly. and I was still the one sweeping their offices while they cashed out. Not anymore. She turned to face him fully now. I don't want your sympathy, she said. I don't need fixing. To hell, I'm not offering sympathy. Then what? Recognition. He held out something, an envelope, plain, white, handwritten name on the front. She took it. Inside was a printed letter, short, to the point. It acknowledged her authorship of the patch from 6 months ago. It described her actions in stopping the internal breach tonight. It was signed by Elliot himself and notarized. I'm submitting this to the board in the morning, he said, and to our external review committee. She blinked. Why? Because I want your name where it should be. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter again. Some people will still doubt it, she said quietly. They'll say you made it up, or that you're covering your ass. Let them. You're risking a lot. I'm building something that needs people like you more than people like Ford. She looked up. Elliot didn't smile. He just held her gaze. I know I can't undo what happened, he said. And I can't change how I treated you earlier, but I can do something now, if you'll let me. She stared at him, weighing the sincerity in his voice. It was still hard to trust, still hard to believe people meant what they said. But maybe this wasn't about belief. Maybe it was about choice. She slid the letter into her pocket. Then she asked, Why did you come back to the office tonight? Elliot blinked. What? Earlier. When you caught me. Why were you here so late? He hesitated, then shrugged. I couldn't sleep. You never sleep? He looked away. It's hard when you think everything can fall apart in one night. She gave a dry laugh. Tell me about it. They stood in silence again, but this time it felt different. Something had shifted, not just between them, but around them. Like the air inside Stratix had changed. Like the walls had heard the truth and decided to stop closing in. Megan turned and started up the stairs. Where are you going? He asked. To finish what I started, she said. There's still cleanup to do. Logs to trace, damage to assess. You're not on the clock. I know, she said over her shoulder. But someone's got to do it, right? And with that, she disappeared up the stairs. Elliot stayed behind for a moment, alone in the stairwell. Then he smiled. Small, tired, but real, and followed. Megan sat in the heart of the Stratix data center, surrounded by walls of humming servers stacked like glass towers. Each blink of a green or blue LED felt like a heartbeat, silent, mechanical, but alive. She'd been working non-stop since sunrise. Her shirt was wrinkled, her braid loosened at the ends, and her eyes stung from staring at code for too long. But she wasn't tired. She was fueled. The deeper she went into Ford's system traces, the more twisted his plan revealed itself to be. He hadn't just created a clone network. He'd quietly disabled parts of the security team's audit protocols. He rerouted certain error messages so they'd register as non-critical events. Some of the digital fingerprints went back nearly a year. He hadn't just been planning to take over Stratix. He had already started. She watched a process log from 3 months ago. It looked normal until she noticed it had sent 2 outputs at once, one to Stratix monitoring tool and one to an external drive that had no business being in the system. It was all there, and nobody had seen it. Not until her. Elliot walked in holding 2 coffees. He offered one without a word. She took it. Feeling depressed, he asked. Worse than you thought, she replied. Ford wasn't just planning an internal overwrite. He's already copied out pieces of Stratix's proprietary code. Some of it's floating on testnets. He was waiting for the moment you rolled out your new product line. Elliot cursed under his breath and rubbed his temples. How did we not see any of this? Because you trusted him, Megan said, and because he knew exactly how your people think. He built around their habits, not just the code. Elliot slumped into the chair beside her. How long until we fix it? Depends how loud you're willing to be. He looked at her sideways. What does that mean? It means you can patch the holes and pretend it was just a near miss. Or you can go public, admit the breach, clean house, expose everyone who let this happen. Joanna's, I'll rebuild you. Elliot fell quiet. Megan turned the monitor toward him. Look, this line here? It shows Ford accessed your private messaging queue last month. Feeling forward. See the hash key, she pointed. That's your CEO tag. He knew your daily routines, your meetings, your calendar. He waited until he was sure you'd step out of the building last night. That's when he triggered the overwrite. He leaned back, stunned. He played me. I've recalled played everyone. She paused. Except me. Elliot's jaw tensed. And I treated you like a threat. She didn't respond. He didn't expect her to. I deserve whatever answer you give, he said. Megan clicked away from the screen. I'm not here to settle scores, Elliot. I'm here to stop this from happening again. She pulled out a thumb drive and handed it to him. Here's a sandboxed version of the clone network. I pulled it from the backup cache and cleaned it of live processes. This is everything Ford built. Elliot took it carefully, like it might burn his fingers. This is gonna bring hell down on us, he said. You're not afraid of the fallout? She met his eyes. I lived through mine. I'm still here. He stared at her, letting the silence stretch until the hum of the servers filled the space again. You really walked away from this world? He said, not as a question. I had no choice. But you're better than half the team I've got. I always was, she said, simply. That hit him harder than he let on. She stood up and walked toward the center console. You want to know what Ford's biggest mistake was? Elliot followed her. Underestimating you. No, she said. That was your mistake. He flinched, just a little. Ford's mistake, she continued, was thinking power comes from stealing control, but real power, the kind that changes things, that comes from being the person nobody sees coming. He looked at her with new eyes. She didn't blink. Just turned back to the console and said, Your board will push back when they see this. They'll want to bury it. I'll handle the board. You better, she said, because if this gets buried, I won't stay silent. Elliot nodded slowly. I believe you. Megan returned to her seat and pulled up the last log file. There's one more signature I haven't decrypted. It's not Ford's. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? Ford had help, someone who masked their network hops from outside the US, I think. He was planning to sell Stratix IP to them after the switch. You mean like a corporate buyer? No, Megan said, like a foreign buyer. Elliot sat back down, jaw clenched. I've only seen a few fragments, she added, but the encryption patterns match offshore state actors. Someone big. We need federal involvement. Not yet, she said. Give me 2 more days. I want to trace it back before they go dark. That's risky. I know it. He looked at her, searching her expression. Why do this? Why not walk away now while you've got your name back? She stared at the screen. Because this isn't about me anymore. Her voice was quiet. It's about all the people who never got their names back. That shut him up. The room went still again. The gravity in her words hung like static in the air. Elliot finally stood and said, Let me know what you need. Megan nodded. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. You're not just a name on a clearance badge, Megan. You're a weapon. She didn't look up from the code. I know, she said. Let's aim me at the right target. The clock on the wall read 2:11 a.m., but time inside the Stratix data center no longer mattered. The lights stayed low. The servers never slept. and the tension in Megan's shoulders had turned into something like electricity. Sharp, charged, unrelenting. The deeper she went into the logs, the colder she felt. This wasn't just about Stratix anymore. And this wasn't just Ford. There was someone else. Someone bigger. Someone smarter. Ford had laid the groundwork, but someone else had filled in the gaps. Another coder, someone more careful. The clone network Ford built was sloppy in comparison. It was noisy in ways only someone like Megan would notice. But now, buried under the archived shell, she found something else. Something quieter. The code was lean, minimal. Each line served a purpose, no redundancies, no footprints. This wasn't someone showing off. This was someone with a mission, and it chilled her. She leaned closer to the screen and began pulling apart the packet headers one by one, isolating them with her own decryption tools. The timestamps didn't match Ford's breach. These entries had started weeks earlier, some as far back as April, and they were nested inside system maintenance logs, hidden behind fake update entries. Every few days, like clockwork, a transmission would be sent out through a secure back channel, always under 500 kilobytes, just small enough to avoid triggering any bandwidth flags. But when she ran the hash check, she saw something she hadn't expected. The payload wasn't just code. It was data, internal Stratix reports, encryption modules, beta blueprints for unannounced projects. Someone had been siphoning information for months, and Stratix never knew. Her breath caught in her throat. The first reaction was fear, the second was fury. She pulled up the endpoint logs and traced the path backward. Whoever had done this had used an internal server as their hub, not an employee device, not a stolen credential. A virtual machine running off the Stratix R&D subnet. Unbelievable, she whispered. They'd created a shadow workspace right under Elliot's nose. Footsteps approached behind her. She turned. Elliot stood in the doorway, his blazer draped over one arm, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie gone. His face looked like it hadn't seen sleep in days. "You found something," he said. She nodded. "You were breached before Ford even started his takeover." His brow furrowed. "How far back?" "Maybe 2 months, could be longer. I'm still digging." "What did they take?" "A lot." He came closer, looking over her shoulder. "Encrypted exports routed to a VPN in Estonia," she said, "but the signal origin was faked. I cross-referenced the bounce sequence. It ends in Beijing." Elliot went still. Megan kept her eyes on the screen. "I've only seen encryption like this once before. Back when I was consulting with Allied defense systems, they called it ice threading. A way to bury packets inside legitimate data streams. It's state-level stuff." "You're saying this is foreign espionage?" "I'm saying you were a target. Ford didn't build that alone. He had a partner, someone outside the company." Elliot ran a hand through his hair. "Jesus." She turned to him. "We need a full lockdown on the R&D subnet. No remote logins, no outgoing connections. We cut the pipes first, then track what's already leaked." He nodded. "Done." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a device. A small black square with a glowing blue edge. She handed it to him. "What is this?" "A ghost trace," she said. "It runs a mirror of your system in real time and flags any outbound connection it doesn't recognize. It's how I found the leak." Elliot turned it over in his hand, impressed. "You built this?" "No, I designed it. Years ago, a friend built it before—" She stopped herself. "Before what?" he asked. She looked down. Before she disappeared. She was a whistleblower too, spoke up about a breach at her company. 2 weeks later, she vanished. Her apartment was cleared out. No trail, like she never existed. Elliot's voice dropped. "You think this is connected?" I think the people who want secrets this badly don't leave loose ends. He stared at her, and for the first time she saw something behind his usual composure. Doubt. Not in her. In himself. I thought I understood the risks of this business, he said. I didn't know it went this deep. She gave a tired smile. It always goes deeper, you just didn't want to see it. He didn't argue. Instead, he picked up his phone and made a call. Shut down R&D access, now. No exceptions. He hung up. Megan returned to the console and began isolating the last batch of leaked files. We need to track their next move. Whoever they are, they'll know the back channel's been exposed. They'll pivot. Maybe even pull out. Can we trace them? I can try. She ran a deep dive script across the server logs, then paused. One file didn't belong. It wasn't encrypted, it wasn't hidden. It was sitting wide open in the root directory of the cloned environment. A .xtec file. She opened it. 2 lines. Too slow. SS. See you soon. Megan's blood ran cold. She stared at the text, unblinking. The file had been written 4 minutes ago. She hadn't beaten them. They'd been watching her. She felt Elliot's hand rest lightly on her shoulder. Say. She closed the window. They know who I am. The weight of that realization hit hard. She wasn't invisible anymore. C was back on the grid. She stood from the chair and faced him. We need to bring in federal cybercrime, she said. Now. He nodded. I'll make the call. She headed for the door. Where are you going? He asked. To set another trap. But they already... She turned. Exactly. And they just made it personal. The air inside Stratix's executive conference room was thick with tension. Screens lined the walls, each glowing with live network feeds, system monitors, and red flag alerts. Megan stood at the center, surrounded by a half-circle of people who hadn't even made eye contact with her 2 days ago. Senior engineers, IT leads, legal counsel, even the CISO. Now she was the one everyone listened to. No one had spoken for almost a minute. She tapped the touchscreen with her knuckle and said, "This, right here, is where Ford handed control to someone outside the company. This script sends all data through a mirrored gateway that routes through a shell server based in Sweden, then relays back to Beijing. Every 26 hours like clockwork." A man in a gray suit near the edge of the table scoffed. "We have multi-layer endpoint verification. That kind of routing would have triggered our IDS weeks ago." Megan looked at him evenly. "It didn't, because he used your signature to whitelist the traffic." The room fell quiet again. The man's face went pale. Elliot sat at the head of the table, arms folded, his expression unreadable. "Which means this wasn't just a one-man job." "No," Megan said. "It wasn't." She reached into her bag and pulled out a second USB drive. Silver, unmarked, cold. She plugged it into the wall port and pulled up the internal communication logs between Stratix employees over the last 6 months. Hundreds of encrypted threads, buried under automated naming conventions. One thread blinked red. Megan tapped it. The messages appeared on the wall, one after another. Anonymous user. "The janitor's watching. She's not stupid." Ford. "I'll deal with it. She doesn't have access." Anonymous user. "She's ASIC confirmed." Megan's jaw tightened. She turned to Elliot. "Your internal communications system logs IP hashes even for anonymous messages. I trace this one." She clicked again. The screen changed. A photo of a woman appeared, mid-30s, dark red hair, glasses, wearing a Stratix security badge. The room gasped. "Rachel Carmichael," Megan said, "head of product security." Rachel stood in the back corner. Her face didn't move, not even a twitch. She stared at the photo, then slowly turned toward Megan. "You traced me," Rachel said, voice calm. "No," Megan replied. "You left a trail. I just knew where to look." Elliot's voice was low, razor-edged. You worked with Ford. Rachel gave a faint shrug. Ford was reckless, but yes. I cleaned up after him when he got too loud. How might? He demanded. Because this company stopped being about invention years ago, she said. You sit on patents, throttle innovation, and sell half-finished tools to government contracts like it's a charity act. Meanwhile, engineers burn out every quarter, and women get ignored in every room unless they're holding a mop. She glanced at Megan. No offense. Megan didn't flinch. You sold Stratix out for what? Money? Elliot asked. Rachel tilted her head. For a reset. Someone had to shake the tree. You didn't just shake it, Megan said. You cut the roots and handed them to people who want to see this place collapse. Rachel smiled softly. Not collapse. Change hands. Security personnel entered the room, summoned by a silent call. They stood still, waiting for the order. Megan looked at Elliot. You know what you have to do. He nodded slowly. Rachel Carmichael, he said, voice formal now. You are suspended immediately, pending federal investigation. Any attempt to access Stratix systems will be treated as hostile action. Rachel didn't move as the guard stepped forward. Her voice remained calm. They'll come for you now, she said to Megan. You made this personal. You let them know you still exist. I never stopped existing, Megan replied. I just stopped hiding. Rachel smirked, as if she respected that answer more than she was willing to admit. Then she turned and walked out with the guards behind her, not resisting, not running. She knew this moment was always coming. After the door closed, the room fell into an eerie quiet. Elliot stood. We hold an emergency board meeting in 90 minutes, he said. Everyone stays in this building until we get federal clearance and network lockdowns are complete. We're going to clean this company from the ground up. The room nodded slowly, some with hesitation, others with silent relief. Megan powered down the screen and turned to leave. Elliot caught up to her just outside the room. You okay? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then she was in every room I wasn't allowed in. She doesn't define you. I know, Megan said, but I've spent years thinking it was just bad luck, just bad timing. It wasn't. It was sabotage. They walked down the hall together, past glass doors, blinking monitors, the distant hum of technology running on borrowed trust. She knew who I was the whole time, Megan added. She saw my name get dragged. She didn't just watch. She pushed. Elliot nodded. We'll make sure the world knows. She stopped walking. He did too. Don't make this about redemption, she said. I'm not a symbol. I'm a coder. I'm here because I know how to stop people like them. That's it. I know. But if I'm going to stay, she continued, we do it my way. Elliot raised a brow. And your way is? We rebuild security. From scratch. No more gatekeeping. No more circles of trust so small they only fit the old boys club. We do this transparently. Audits. Open source verification. You want Stratix to be what it says it is, then let the right people lead it. He smiled faintly. You sound like a department head already. I'm not asking, she said. I wasn't joking. She blinked. He held her gaze. I want you to run security architecture. Full department authority. Build it however you see fit. She exhaled slowly, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. You sure? I've never been more sure about anything in my life. She looked down the hallway and nodded. Then let's clean house. The next 72 hours were chaos. Every desk at Stratix's headquarters became a war room. Conference tables were covered with open laptops, tangled charging cables, and half-empty coffee cups. Engineers who hadn't spoken in months now leaned shoulder to shoulder, decoding packet logs. Legal teams operated in shifts, redlining non-disclosure clauses and preparing for subpoenas. What used to be the pristine, polished tech fortress now felt like the middle of a battleground, but it was alive. And at the center of it all, Megan Glassberg moved like she'd always belonged there. Gone was the janitor's uniform. She now wore jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and a Stratix lanyard clipped to her belt. Not because anyone made her wear it, but because she wanted them to see the name. Glassberg. No middle name, no hiding. Elliot gave her full control over the security command room, and for the first time in the company's history, the people inside weren't all white men in pressed dress shirts. Megan had pulled together a team of sharp, overlooked minds from the lowest tiers of the company. People who had been answering support tickets, doing QA, running audits. People who were invisible until now. She trained them herself. "Nothing leaves this room unless we say so," she told them. "Every outbound ping gets flagged, every device ID is verified. We use my framework, not the legacy crap that let this happen, and we document everything. If you're not comfortable questioning authority, you shouldn't be here." No one left. In fact, people started knocking to get in. Elliot watched from the glass wall outside, sometimes joining them, sometimes just listening. He didn't try to micromanage. He didn't even speak much. Maybe he was still trying to earn back her trust. Or maybe he realized that for once, the smartest thing he could do was stay out of her way. On the fourth day, Megan stood before a screen filled with cascading lines of code. Her eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, but her focus was razor-sharp. She'd just caught the last route trace from the backdoor Ford's offshore contact had been using. A small, dormant process designed to activate months from now and reintroduce a modified clone network, hidden deeper. She smiled. "Nice try." She isolated the function, wrapped it in a custom quarantine loop, and tagged it with a string of her own. / this time, I'm watching. SG. She hit enter and the loop closed in on the process, collapsing it like a dying star. Behind her, one of the junior analysts clapped. That was poetic. "Hackers are storytellers," Megan replied. "I'm just giving them the ending they deserve." Elliot entered then, holding 2 bottles of water and a folded envelope. He handed her one. "How's it look?" he asked. "Clean," she said. "For the first time since I walked in, I don't see any red flags." He nodded. "Good. You've done more in 5 days than most people manage in 5 years. She took a sip, then eyed the envelope in his other hand. "What's that?" He held it up. "Offer letter." She raised a brow. "I told you," he said. "Head of Security Architecture. It's yours." She took it, unfolded it carefully. Inside was exactly what he said. An official offer, signed by the board, with a salary she hadn't dared to imagine. "There's a clause in there," he added, "naming you as lead on all future cybersecurity development projects. Full independence. You report directly to me." Megan folded the letter again and slid it into her back pocket. "I'll sign it," she said. Elliot smiled. "But not because I want the title," she continued. "I want the work. The real work. I want to rebuild this company so no one ever gets locked out of their own future the way I did." He nodded. "Then let's do it." That afternoon, Megan stood before a packed auditorium in the building's lower wing. It was a town hall, an emergency one, but unlike every other meeting Stratix had ever held, this one was different. She was the speaker, not Elliot. A projector behind her displayed a single slide, a redacted system map showing every known breach vector Ford and Rachel had exploited. She looked out at the crowd, techs, analysts, product leads, HR staff, janitors, and said, "Everything you see behind me is a map of where we were weak. Not because of lazy coding, not because of outdated firewalls, because of a culture that assumed danger only came from outside. It doesn't. It grows inside walls built too high to question." No one spoke. She stepped closer. I wasn't hired to clean up code. I was hired to clean up spills. But the first time I touched this company's core systems, I found a breach that none of your top engineers saw. And I wasn't surprised, because I've been watching for years, and I know the truth. It's never about what you know. It's about who gets to know. A few people nodded. From today on, she said, we build with visibility. We open doors. We audit loud. And we give the keys to people who've been locked out for too long. You want to know who saved Stratix? She pointed to the room behind her, to the team she'd built from overlooked departments and underpaid talent, using the data. And then she said something no one expected. And so can you. The applause started slowly. Then it filled the room. That night, Megan stood on the rooftop of Stratix's building. The city stretched out around her in a glow of windows and headlights. She had a badge now, an office, a title. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she'd written her name back into the code, not just the systems, but her own. Behind her, Elliot stepped onto the roof. He handed her a USB drive. "So what's this?" she asked. "The FBI. They sent over a list of breached companies they want you to look at. They said it's voluntary." She took the drive, held it in her hand. "You going to help?" she asked. "Only if I can keep up." She smirked. "You can try." And for the first time in years, Megan laughed, really laughed, not out of bitterness, not out of disbelief, but out of freedom. Because the breach was gone. And the future? It was hers now. The Stratix auditorium was full. Not with engineers hunched over laptops or executives whispering strategy behind closed doors, but with people. People in denim jackets, pressed suits, company hoodies, and maintenance uniforms. People who knew the feeling of being ignored, overlooked, underestimated. And for the first time in the company's history, those people were sitting front row. On the massive stage stood a new plaque. Simple, understated, but impossible to ignore. The Megan Glassberg Center for Ethical Cybersecurity. Elliot had insisted on the name. Megan fought it. She didn't want the story to be about her, but as she stood backstage, peeking out through the curtain, she realized this wasn't just her story anymore. It was theirs. Her team was seated together in the first two rows. Cynthia from tech support, Jay from facilities, who had once loaned her his spare mop, Zora, the junior QA analyst, who turned out to be a log-parsing genius. All of them had helped her expose the deepest breach Stratix had ever faced. All of them were still here, still fighting. Elliot walked on stage first. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a shirt with rolled-up sleeves and the faint look of someone who'd been changed by the storm they survived. He took the mic and scanned the crowd. "There are days when leadership means knowing exactly what to say," he began. "And then there are days when you shut up and hand the mic to someone smarter." Laughter. Then applause. He turned and gestured to the curtain. Megan stepped out. She didn't smile at first. She took a long breath and looked at the faces waiting for her. Not with doubt, not with judgment, with hope. Then she spoke. "When I first came here," she said, "nobody knew my name. I wore a badge with a title that didn't include my degree. I worked nights, spoke rarely, and watched code pass by my mop bucket like it was happening in another universe." She paused. "I didn't hate it," she continued. "Sometimes invisibility is safer than attention." A hush fell across the room. But something changed the night I found an open terminal in a locked office. I didn't step forward because I wanted recognition. I stepped forward because I saw a threat, and I knew I was the only one who could stop it. She looked around, not because I was smarter than everyone else, but because I had lived on the outside, because I knew what it felt like to be silenced, ignored, written off. And people who know that feeling, they don't look away. Heads nodded in the crowd. "I didn't think I'd get my name back," she said. "But I did, and now I want more people to have that chance." She turned and pointed to the plaque. "This center is just a building, but what we do in it, the way we build teams, write code, protect truth, that's what will last." Applause rose again, louder this time. People stood. Some clapped slowly, some cheered, some simply nodded with tears in their eyes. Megan stood still for a moment, letting the sound wash over her. She wasn't used to it, the volume, the visibility, but she didn't flinch. She'd earned this. Later that evening, as the building cleared out and conversations turned to laughter and late dinners, Megan stayed behind. She stood in the new server room, alone, fingers brushing the cool glass of the terminal she now called hers. On the screen, a small window blinked. New message from unknown. Subject, "We saw your speech." She opened it. The text read, "You wrote your name into history. Nicely done. But remember, history has a long memory. Stay sharp." Megan stared at the message. Her face didn't change. She typed back one line. "I'm not hiding anymore. Come find me." She hit send, closed the window, then smiled. Outside, Elliot was waiting by the elevator. "You okay?" he asked as she approached. "Yeah," she said, "more than okay." "You sure?" She turned toward him. "I built something today. Not just code, not just firewalls, something real." He nodded. "We couldn't have done it without you." She looked at him and smiled softly. "You're learning." They stepped into the elevator together. As the doors slid shut, Megan glanced back once more at the floor they were leaving. We shall be no longer a place where she was invisible. Now a place that bore her name in lights.